Crise des médias mondiaux, des médias ferment régulièrement dans un tiers des pays. Explorer les tendances alarmantes de l'Indice mondial de la liberté de la presse 2025 et ses implications.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking closely at the new 2025 World Press Freedom Index. And this isn't only about, the physical dangers reporters face, though that's definitely part of it. We're digging into the data that shows a really big shift happening across the media world.
Exactly. And our goal here, really, is to pull out the key numbers, the most telling figures, and try to understand what they're actually telling us about, well, the availability of reliable information globally.
Right.
The index covers a lot of ground, different countries, situations. We want to give you a sort of concise overview of the critical points.
Okay, let's dive right in. This year's index, it marks a pretty worrying milestone, doesn't it?
It really does. For the first time, the findings show that conditions for actually doing journalism are now rated as bad in fully half of the world's countries.
Half.
Yeah. Reporters Without Borders, they compiled this index. They're calling it a major red line. And it's really interesting is the main driver they identify for this decline globally, it's these growing, potent economic pressures on media outlets.
Half the world, that's a stark image. And I heard the number of people living where the press is genuinely free is tiny.
Shockingly low. Less than 1% of everyone on the planet lives in a country where press freedom is fully guaranteed. Just think about that. The vast, vast majority lack access to a completely free media.
And the index also flagged an increase in the places with the absolute worst press restrictions.
Yes, exactly. The number of countries and territories in that deep red zone, the most critical category, it's gone up from 36 to 42.
Okay.
New additions this year include Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Jordan, Uganda, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Hong Kong.
Hong Kong, right. That's significant.
Very significant. And the index draws this comparison saying Hong Kong's approach towards reporters is looking more and more like mainland China's, which, consistently ranks as one of the world's biggest jailers of journalists.
So, okay, physical safety is always there. It's a risk. But the index seems to be shouting about something else really driving this downturn this year.
Precisely. I mean, violence, imprisonment, those are terrifyingly real threats. But the 2025 index really puts the spotlight on economic pressure as the single most significant factor weakening press freedom right now, globally.
Okay.
It's maybe more subtle than an attack, but it's incredibly damaging to news organizations.
And this isn't just a minor budget issue. It's really widespread.
Alarmingly so, yeah. In over 85% of the countries they looked at, media outlets are basically struggling to stay financially afloat.
Wow.
This isn't just, tightening belts. It's threatening the actual existence of many news sources.
And this financial insecurity, it's leading to actual closures.
Absolutely. You see, in nearly a third of countries looked at, news organizations have literally been forced to shut their doors or operate from exile.
A third of countries.
Yeah. We're seeing it play out in places like Nicaragua, Belarus, Iran, Afghanistan, places where these economic weaknesses get amplified by really tough political climates.
Let's look at some specific countries. Argentina, I saw, had a particularly sharp drop.
Argentina's fall was steep, down 21 places to 87th. The index links this to President Milei's public sort of stigmatization of journalists and his government's moves to dismantle public media structures.
Right.
So you see how that global economic trend interacts with local politics, causing a big hit in the rankings.
And the United States also slipped. What's the picture there?
The U.S. dropped 2 places, landing at 57th. But what's maybe more concerning is the big drop in its economic indicator score that's fallen over 14 points in just the last 2 years.
14 points, okay.
And this reflects that growing issue of news deserts, areas often local, where newspapers just shut down, leaving people with little or no local reporting.
Right.
Surveys mentioned in the index from states like Arizona, Florida, Nevada, Pennsylvania, they showed journalists really struggling to make a living wage, and most think their local outlets are in serious economic trouble.
And political decisions seem to add to that strain, too.
Well, the index does mention the impact during Donald Trump's second term, citing what it calls false economic pretexts to pressure the press.
Right.
This apparently included sudden funding cuts to the U.S. Agency for Global Media that affects Voice of America, Radio Free, Europe Radio Liberty, and also freezing U.S.-wide funding.
Right, which has knock-on effects globally.
Huge effects. The report estimates over 400 million people worldwide saw reduced access to reliable info because of this. And many news outlets, especially in places like Ukraine, faced critical instability. Some even had to close.
Tunisia's ranking also fell quite a bit.
It did. Down 11 places to 129th, and its economic score within North Africa dropped sharply too. It just highlights again how economic fragility can be made worse by political situations.
And the description for Palestine was pretty grim.
Tragically, yes. Palestine is ranked 163rd. We've seen newsrooms destroyed in Gaza, nearly 200 journalists killed, according to reports cited, and this total blockade. Even Israel's rank fell significantly, down 11 places to 112th.
And Haiti, too, linking instability and media economics.
Yeah, the ongoing political chaos in Haiti has just devastated its media economy. It's now 112th, which is down 18 spots.
So we've mentioned several countries now where outlets are closing, journalists are fleeing.
It's a clear pattern. The index points to 34 countries where this is particularly acute economic hardship, making political oppression even worse for media. You see Nicaragua, Belarus, Iran, Myanmar, Sudan, Azerbaijan, Afghanistan. These names keep coming up where the media landscape is just collapsing, forcing journalists out.
Okay, let's pivot slightly to the digital side. How are the big tech platforms playing into this economically?
That's a huge piece of the puzzle. These largely unregulated online giants, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, they're just soaking up more and more of the advertising revenue.
The money that used to fund newsrooms.
Exactly. In 2024, social media ad spending hit, get this, $247.3 billion. That's a 14% jump in just 1 year.
Wow.
And that massive shift just fundamentally weakens the financial base for journalism.
And it's not just where the ad money goes, but also who actually owns the media that's left.
Right. Media ownership concentration is flagged as a major threat to, diversity of voices. The index says it's high in 46 countries.
And sometimes it's the state itself.
Yes, or people very close to the state. Russia and Hungary are given as examples where the state or friendly oligarchs have huge control, and they often use state advertising money unfairly, basically rewarding allies and punishing critics.
And this ownership issue isn't just confined to countries low down the rankings, is it?
No, not at all. Even in places ranked relatively high, like Australia, Canada, Czechia, even France, concentration of ownership is a worry, because it restricts the range of viewpoints you get, the editorial diversity. And it naturally raises questions about independence from the owner's own financial or political interests.
Which can lead to owners actually interfering with news coverage.
Precisely. The index states that in over half the countries they assessed, owners reportedly meddle with editorial independence.
Really?
Yeah. In places like Lebanon, India, Armenia, Bulgaria, it might be through sort of conditional funding. But then in countries like Rwanda, the UAE, Vietnam, the report says owners always interfere.
So putting all this together, what's the overall global verdict on press freedom for 2025?
Well, for the first time ever, the index classifies the overall global situation as difficult. The average score across all countries has dipped below 55 points.
And most countries are seeing declines.
Over 60% saw their scores go down. So conditions are now difficult or very serious in more than half the world, and satisfactory. Fewer than a quarter of countries make that grade.
Are there big differences between regions?
There are, yeah. The Middle East North Africa is still the most dangerous region overall for journalists.
Okay.
In Asia Pacific, most countries saw their economic scores fall, partly influenced by China's control model. Sub-Saharan Africa is also worrying, a definite downturn, with 80% of its countries seeing worse economic scores, often due to hyper-concentration of ownership.
Any bright spots?
Senegal actually moved up, which was linked to some economic reform efforts, so that's positive.
And the Americas?
Mostly declining economic scores there, too. We mentioned the U.S. and Argentina. Peru and El Salvador also saw press freedom weaken. Mexico remains incredibly dangerous, and Nicaragua is right near the bottom. Brazil, though, continues to recover, which is good news.
What about Europe? Still leading?
Europe does lead regionally, yes. Norway is #1 again. But even the EU Balkans area isn't immune to this economic crisis. Most countries there saw economic scores drop. People are watching how the new European Media Freedom Act might affect things once it's implemented. But places like Portugal, Croatia, Kosovo saw things worsen.
So wrapping this up, the big takeaway really seems to be this economic fragility. It's a critical, growing threat everywhere.
That really is the central finding this year. This economic pressure is directly hurting the availability of reliable information. And that's a massive challenge for Well, for an informed public, for democracy itself.
Definitely gives us a lot to think about. With these increasing economic pressures squeezing newsrooms, what does that actually mean long term for how we all access news, how we understand the world? And maybe what role do we as individuals play in supporting a press that's both free and crucially economically viable? Something to really mull over after this deep dive.